I'm really happy to introduce Ian Wright, who's the head of Utah's Site Stewardship Program, which is hosted by our State Historical Preservation Office. We're thrilled to have this up and running. ARARA tried for 20 years to get the government agencies to host a program like this, and everybody agreed it was important, but nobody had any money. But we have a very active SHPO who's doing an incredible job for us. And they managed to get funding from the state to put this together. And I think in what's it been going for about 3 years now, we've got one of the largest site stewardship programs in the country. And I know Ian is the head of it, and he's a hard worker. Every time I call him, he's in his car going to a new site to show somebody a site that they need to steward. He has a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University, and I'm thrilled to have him presenting what the site stewardship program in Utah is doing.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for the introduction, Troy. I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you for the opportunity to come and to speak with your organization. You guys do a lot of incredible work, and I'm excited to be here. So just again, by way of introduction, Troy gave me, I appreciate the introduction he gave me, and I am the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office, and I have a background in community education and programming and cultural heritage management, with cultural heritage from Johns Hopkins there. But really, my passion, I like to do woodworking on the side, and that's something a little bit about me I wanted to share. We found that when we go speak with communities around the state, when we say, hey, we're here with the government, we're here to help, that usually doesn't go over so well. So it's important to kind of give a little background. My wife's name is Tyron. She's from the northern part of the state of Utah. And if you guys haven't been up there, it's cold, and there's a lot of alpine environment. So we spend a lot of time skiing. I've got a big dog named Buffalo, and he weighs about 100 pounds, and a desert tortoise we adopted from the Division of Natural Resources. And my son's name is Conrad, and my daughter's name is Brecken. So that's just a little bit about me. And then tonight, wanted to share with you why we have a statewide stewardship program, how it came to be, why this program matters, how the UCSS program operates, and some of the positive impact that it's had on the state of Utah. I'm going to move this little screen around here real quick. There we go. Now, the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program, we call it UCSS, and it is truly the spear tip of public archaeology here in the state of Utah and fostering a united front. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what this united front means, but what I want you to keep in mind as I give this presentation is that this program is gritty, and it is very much a grassroots style program. We work with people from all over the state, and we're not really too worried about being too polished. So if you see any spelling errors or anything in this or inconsistencies, I'm not real worried about it. Now, just for you guys, Utah just got a new flag. And I don't know if any of you know what our new flag is, but we're pretty proud of it. Our office was able to help with that. It ends up actually being Flag A. That is the new flag. Flag D is the old flag of the state of Utah, but this is the one that we think should have won. This one's got kind of everything you need in it. This was actually a real submittal that was considered. It's got the state dinosaur on the state sport, skiing with the state fish, shooting the state gun with the state motto. This is our personal favorite. Just thought I'd share that with you guys. Now, in Utah, we are really lucky. We have over 13,000 years of human history that we are aware of. Now, it could be a lot more, but this is what we can at least prove. And with the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program, we care about all of it, whether it's all the way back 13,000 years ago or up to very recent. You know, within that 50-year period is protected by archaeological law, but that doesn't mean that we still won't steward stuff even more modern, whether that's military vehicles, rock imagery, habitation sites, industrial sites, whatever. even things that you maybe wouldn't consider that don't fit into that nice little perfect archaeological Smithsonian trinomial niche. These are some sites around Utah that are very significantly, culturally significant to the people of Utah. The Joseph Smith Sphinx, we've got the Mother Mary tree, the Dino up in Vernal. Those are all examples of sites like this that we also steward. Now, we all kind of know basic archaeology here, I'm assuming. And the basic description, the boring description of archaeology is it's the study of human activity through the recovery and analysis of material culture. But it's really not. It's more than that. It's, yeah, sure, it's the tangible things, but it's also the intangible. It's the landscape, it's the places, it's the living people. And this is a really good example of this. Here we've got some tangible thing, that those crossed guns, but in that same spot, we have those stories that even though they happened a long time ago, they haven't been forgotten and they haven't been lost. And we have this photo of the 9th Cavalry, the Buffalo Soldier unit, standing there. And then over here on the right, we have another photo in the same spot with living people who are connected to that history. And that's what makes it so rich. And why do these archaeological and cultural sites matter? Well, they matter for a lot of different reasons, but most importantly is everything we steward in the state of Utah is connected to a living descendant community. And I wanted to share a little bit with you about some of the descendant communities here in Utah. Now, I won't be able to cover them all, but this will give you a pretty good flavor. In Utah, is home to 8 distinct tribal nations. All of these are thriving. They're alive, they're well, and many other tribes are connected with Utah, are affiliated with Utah, and it's a rich culture that we're very proud of here in the state of Utah. Also, the Chinese descendant railroad workers descendant community. This is a group that can trace their ancestry back to the Chinese railroad workers who worked on the railroad that connected here in the state of Utah. We've got a lot of Pacific Islanders that call Utah home and can trace their ancestry back to especially a space called Yosepa out in Skull Valley. And this is a picture of people going back for a family reunion to remember their family. We've got a lot of different descendant communities that came in with the mining industry here in the state of Utah. One of my colleagues here in the middle, Lexi, her family came in as Greek immigrants in Carbon County through the mines down there. And every year they celebrate that, and they continue to remember their ancestry with their traditions and dance and stories and history. Even though the tangible objects may not be as evident today, that intangible is still very strong. Semihadithi is a group here in Utah focused on Black American cultural sites, which is a rich history throughout the state. The Hispanic community, whether that's, your Spaniard community coming up with the Spanish Trail, the Hispanic community were some of the first people to come into Utah as non-natives and explore this region, and that culture is still alive and well. Many of you have heard of the LDS community or the Mormon people. Their descendants came into this valley to resettle a lot of these areas and to and one thing they do each year that's a really cool remembrance of that is this thing called trek, where a lot of them will go out and reenact what their ancestors went through as they crossed the plains. The Topaz Japanese internment camp. This is just one aspect of Japanese history in the state of Utah, and this is a groundbreaking ceremony where many of the descendants went out to, as they started to build a museum to commemorate the people who were in that internment camp. Now, my boss happens to be from California, and she wanted me to remember not to forget our rapidly growing descendant community here in the state of Utah. And I asked her what she felt best represented the entire population of California, and avocado toast and In-N-Out Burger, we felt really crushed it right there. So this is a rapidly growing descendant community. We're still proud of them too. And these people, all of them are still here, and their stories matter, and their histories often overlap. And there's a lot of different approaches to stewardship. There's not really one specific way to do it. And even the idea of what stewardship means can be very different to different people. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter and that it's not important. If you disconnect from the human stories, you really disconnected from the archaeology. And it's sometimes hard for people to remember that. And just to share with you an example, this is the ghost town of Sego, Utah. There's nothing really there anymore today. However, this gentleman, Warren, in this picture on the left, he was one of the last people born in that community. And for him, it's still very much alive. He remembers the stories and the places and the events that happened there. And, he by himself is quite an incredible person too. He manned the compressor units with over 100 pounds of PTE gear on when the Wilburg mine disaster happened in Carbon County, Utah, and kept the air compressors going to keep the mine rescuers there as they look for people who were trapped underground. So that's what brings the archaeology to life and really adds a lot of interest to it. Now, archaeological thinking, context is everything. Whether that's tangible or intangible, these resources are invaluable. They're non-renewable and they belong to everybody or to nobody, however you choose to look at that. But without taking into consideration the full context, you really don't know much about the site. And it's amazing. I meet a lot of people all the time that think they know a lot about it, but they don't. And this is a really good example. This is one site, and if you're a rock imagery fan, you may see one component of rock imagery there, but there's also a lot more. There's also historic inscriptions. There's Antoine Roubidoux, who is a mountain and fur trader. There's also the ranching, the cowboy history. There's buffalo soldier history, military history, Greek wine growing history, all in this one spot. And if we tried to differentiate it from one another, we really don't know the story of this area at all. It's important to understand all of it within that context. And removing objects from an area inhibits our ability to understand the context. And that's something that we at the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program deal with every day. Leaving all artifacts where it is one of the constant struggles that we have. And just as an example, over here on the right, these are some beautiful pots, and I'm sure they have an incredible story, but we don't know what they are. They were looted off of public land, and we can kind of get a general idea of maybe-ish where they're from, but who really knows? However, this ugly little brush over here on the left that doesn't look like much, and it smells awful, is actually very significant. And it came off the bombing range in Utah's West Desert. They were concerned that the site actually might get hit. And that's connected directly to the Donner Party as they were traveling through the state of Utah and had to drop some of their wagons and supplies in an effort to try to make it over the Sierra Nevadas. And we all know how that turned out. Now, we deal with a lot of different types of people who damage archaeology and cultural sites in Utah. We have vandals, people who are just intentionally out there, they disrespect the past, thieves, people who are trying to make some type of a profit off of it. Development, when it's not done through proper channels, can be incredibly destructive. But by far, the majority of what we deal with is unintentional damage. People that don't realize that their actions and what they are doing are damaging sites. And this is a really good example of a prominent rock imagery site here in the state of Utah that is being damaged over time as people lean up against this panel. All of this gray is from the oils of people's hands, and it's starting to deteriorate the rock imagery there. So one of the mottos that we teach all of the people as we go out and about is to not touch rock imagery, or of course to make their own. Now, how this program came to be. As Utah has become more and more popular, more and more people have been visiting our state. But it's not just visitors from outside the state coming into Utah. We're also having a huge population increase from our own current population having children. And this has put a much heavier impact onto our cultural resources. And some of it has been negative intentionally caused. Most of it's been unintentional. But this is an example of one that was very intentional. This is a prominent rock imagery site, the birthing panel outside of Moab, Utah, where someone wrote across it "white power." Now they spelled white wrong, so they crossed it out, tried to spell it again. And, the Bureau of Land Management has done an amazing job mitigating that site, cleaning that up. But because of this and others, there was a huge public outcry in 2019 for the state of Utah to help to get involved and to support land managers to try to do something to better protect our cultural resources. And this program really came about and because of that outcry. And just like Troy said, organizations like ARARA, organizations like all the state and federal land managing agencies and the Utah public lobbied the state to create this program. So it was legislated into state code. Now, that's a really big deal. The Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program is legislated into state code. To my understanding, this is the most significant effort in that direction that a state has made. Now, it was centralized. It was a centralized program, meaning they didn't want it to be parceled off like a little unit here with the Bureau of Land Management, a little unit here with a state office, a little unit here with a nonprofit. They wanted to be centralized and managed from the State Historic Preservation Office. And the State Historic Preservation Office has a responsibility to work with all the communities and agencies within Utah. Wanted to draw attention to this. Well, one of the first mandates for the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program is to protect cultural sites located within the state of Utah. And that is what drives everything that we do. And every year, the state legislature has doubled down on this program. They continue to support it with additional staff, additional vehicles, dedicated funds. Now, the State Historic Preservation Office, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with it, every state has one. And in Utah, they're a little different out west because out west we have a lot of public lands, so they can be quite a bit bigger. So we take care of all the archaeological records in the state of Utah, the compliance with the laws, the historic preservation, so the tax credits and plaques for historic buildings is from our office. Human remains, the cemetery program. We have the state's forensic anthropologists. Public archaeology is out of the State Historic Preservation Office as well. And this program falls within that public archaeology portion of what we do. Now, when the National Historic Preservation Act was signed into law in 1966, that essentially created the mandate that SHPOs have, which are to preserve and to protect the unique history of each individual state. These are some of the partners that we partner with at the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program. That includes every single state and federal land managing agency. Again, every single state and federal land managing agency is a partner in this program, as well as a bunch of nonprofits, for-profits, different corporations, municipalities, all pitching in to project that unitive and that collective front to the both internally and externally to the world that Utah values these resources. So much so that the governor of Utah, Governor Cox, actually released a PSA to essentially the world and everyone visiting Utah and living in Utah saying, hey, cultural resources are something that matter to us here in Utah. This is something that we value and they are part of our legacy and we must protect them. This is kind of a political hot button and a lot of governors won't even touch that. But the governor of Utah didn't even blink when this opportunity came up. Now, why a cultural site stewardship program? Well, we have over 122,000 archaeological sites in our database alone. Just to give you an idea, that's a lot, but like in the Bears Ears region, there's probably like 600,000 archaeological sites, and we don't even have records for the majority of those, right? Many of these are world-renowned here in the state of Utah. I mean, if you read an archaeological book, go through school for cultural heritage archaeology, you read about Greece, you read about Rome, you read about Egypt, but you will always read about Utah as well. And it adds a great deal to our quality of life. It adds a great deal to the quality of life of those who visit Utah, those who recreate in Utah, and even those who read about Utah. And every day we lose a little bit of this history. And I wanted to show you this map because this is a map, everything in tan, everything in brown, everything in orange. Those are archaeological sites in the state of Utah that we have records for. But everything in brown represents 7,000 archaeological sites that have recently been vandalized or damaged in some capacity here in the state of Utah. Now, everything in white, that's where we've had car problems, which is also extensive. But it goes to show you there's a lot out there that, and that's difficult to manage. And again, for those of you who are not familiar with Utah, about 65% of our land is federal land. 10% is state, 20% is private, almost 21, 5% is tribal. And to give you an example, like a comparison, about 4.2% of Texas is public land. The rest is private. Utah, 65 is federal, another 10 is state. So that's a huge amount of our land that is in the public domain. Over the years, there's been a change of thinking when it comes to helping to protect cultural resources. It used to be more of a gatekeeper mentality, like, hey, the public's the bad guy, we got to keep it secret, they are the problem. And it shifted to really, you know what, let's enlist the public. These are the people who are out on the land, the people who care about these resources. Often they're the descendants, they care about them. How can we get them involved? And in Utah, we need that because our land managers, sometimes there's an archaeologist for 1.5 million acres, maybe 2 million acres. When we're down a law enforcement officer, we may have a Bureau law enforcement officer that's patrolling from the Idaho border to the center of the state and then subbing in over on the eastern side of the state. So having more eyes on the ground, more people makes a huge difference. And the primary driver for the stewardship program is building a network of support for those land managers. When I say land managers, it could be the archaeologists, it could be the park manager, it could be the law enforcement, whoever has a part in managing those resources on that land. Generally, we work with the archaeologists, but again, it just depends on which agency or who it is. It could be a mine boss, who knows. Also, we decided the best way to support these land managers were to get the public involved and to do this in an effective way. And one of the biggest things we do is we do catch the bad guy actually quite a bit. And I'll address that here in a little bit. But more effectively is getting out in front of the problem, correcting bad behaviors and preventing them in the first place. And by far, that's the majority of what we try to do. And how we do this is by working with everybody. As long as people will do what we ask them to do and steward the way that we need them to steward, we will work with them, whether that's a mining company, a ski company, an ambassador group, the Department of Tourism, doesn't matter. It's important that we go outside of our networks to find people who can help us with this. And our core pillars are, again, involving the public, correcting and preventing bad behaviors, educating, and then supporting those land managers. And how the UCSS program works is the land managers provide the permission. They provide the list of sites that need to be stewarded. They manage the resource and they have the ultimate say on their land. The UCSS program provides the administration. The volunteers are volunteers of the state of Utah. So they are our volunteers. We support those volunteers, train those volunteers, place those volunteers, and manage the data. That's a huge part right there, that data. Without that data, it's just a club. With that data, it's a professional organization. There are many ways to be good stewards. And I wanted to show you some of the ways that Utah has capitalized on stewardship. So one of the ways is monitoring archaeological and cultural sites. And how we do this is public volunteers support the land managers by going out to assigned sites and monitoring them. They're looking for damages, changes, vandalism, theft, looting, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's environmental, sometimes it's human caused, and they report those changes back to the land managing agency. Another way that stewards can steward is by helping with our projects. As the program has grown, we've taken on more and more project-based stewardship. This is an example of several stewards helping to do some research on a Buffalo Soldier heritage trail that we're developing through the state of Utah. And a lot of that is an intangible stewardship, but it's nonetheless equally as important as the tangible stewardship. Now, becoming a steward in the state of Utah is actually a little bit difficult, and intentionally so. We require stewards to go through a 3-step onboarding process. One is a classroom training, then they must fill out all the applications and forms, and they also have to go out with one of the UCSS members and the land manager to get placed on the site. So that's the third part of the training. Now, this is a requirement. This requirement, I'll just read it. These requirements, spelled weird, are directives from Utah's interagency task force. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with that, Utah has an interagency task force where all the agencies get together and discuss some of these things, and they are non-negotiable. So this comes from that group, and everyone without exception must go through this process. Without completing them, you do not steward or participate in UCSS-related projects in the state of Utah. And I'll show you why that is. And it seems pretty harsh, but it's very important. And we take this very serious that we're getting the right type of people into this program. And we work very closely with all of our land managing partners to ensure that this program is in lockstep with the goals and objectives of both their agencies and the state of Utah. And this is a really good example. Our first in-class training, this is kind of where we go over the basics, the do's, the don'ts, some of the archaeology, the things that they'll be monitoring for, how to do it safely, confidentiality. But in this particular picture, this is the entire field office in Price going through this training. So even the Bureau of Land Management employees went through this training to become stewards. Now, the second part, we want to make sure that our stewards are successful because they're donating their time and their resources to help with this project. We want to make sure that they have what they need to kick butt when they're out on the ground. So their ability level, their historic interests, the preferred counties, what type of vehicles they have. So we always also require for safety, law enforcement, for our land managers in our database, a photo of all of our stewards. We want to make sure we understand what their primary interests are, and we try to accommodate that where possible. People tend to steward things that they care more about. We want to know how far they're willing to hike. Sometimes they can't hike. That's fine. We have stuff for all different ability levels here in the state of Utah. We want to make sure we know what is appropriate for them, what types of vehicles they have. And let me tell you what, we find out really fast if they lie to us about their vehicles because we take them at their face value. Then we also ask them to select different counties that they'd be willing to steward in. And again, it depends on what sites we have available and that need stewarding. So we usually say pick 2 or 3 counties. Then we also ask just some basic information about the stewards so we get to know them a little bit better. We require all of our stewards to sign liability agreements and assumption of risk waivers. This is not a backcountry insurance program. We assume that people are already out and about on the land, and this is something that they are willing to do while they are already out and about as a way of giving back and helping to preserve and protect these resources. We also require all stewards to sign a code of conduct. This comes out of that interagency task force meeting and is a absolute requirement of the program here in Utah. This also enables us, if necessary, to take action should somebody break those rules. Photo release. When those photos come in using the app, we'll tell you later, they become property of the state of Utah. It doesn't mean we steal their phone or anything like that. It's just once something is submitted, or if we take a photo, we don't have to pay royalties on that. Now, the baseline visit, this is where we put a lot of effort to go out into the field with each and every steward, so that we can make sure that they are successful. And by the way, this BLM land manager here is actually the steward of this site out there with one of the UCSS members, getting them set up, making sure that they are comfortable on that site, that they have everything that they need to be successful, answering any questions that they have, making sure that the app is working that we use to monitor, and answering any questions that individual might have. The app that we use to monitor these sites has really revolutionized the way Utah monitors archaeological and cultural resources. In the past, people used to do it on digital forms or on like different Excel spreadsheets, and those would live in different people's databases, different apps, different places, different boxes, and different field office. And it was kind of a mess. But this way, they just simply take out their phone or a tablet. They can fill it out with or without service, let us know what's happening on the site. That comes into the state. We look it over, turn it into a PDF, uploaded to the state's digital archaeological database. Utah, by the way, has the most sophisticated statewide archaeological data management system in the nation, and has actually received several awards for that. And what's really cool is not only do you have the original archaeological site files there in that data system, right over there to the left in that drop-down button at the bottom is the Utah Cultural Site Steward Archive, where these monitoring reports that the stewards sit right alongside the original archaeological site. So when an archaeologist needs to know about that site, not only can they pull up the archaeological record, but they can see the most up-to-date real-time information about it. And by the way, the state literally could get hit with a nuclear bomb and those data records would be fine. Now, the only monitoring app approved for use and data ingestion in Utah is the UCSS monitoring app. This is what it looks like over on the left. Why this is because it meets the security requirements of the state and our agency partners, including the national park. And if any of you have worked with the national park, that can be real tricky to get through their requirements. It is managed by the state of Utah. It conforms with our data upload requirements. It follows the SHPO data standards, which are extremely high. It ties into the state's permanent digital archaeological data storage, and it is accessible only to people with licensed archaeological, with the licenses necessary to access them. So it's very protected, and it's easy to use. And that's a big deal because a lot of monitoring apps can be somewhat complicated. And we've tried to make this one as easy as possible. Doesn't mean we still don't have struggles here and there, but in comparative, it's very easy to use. Once that is submitted by the stewards out in the field, comes into the digital archaeological database at the Marriott Library, and then it is made available to all of our land managing partners. Now, we ask our stewards to commit to visiting sites 4 times a year. And oftentimes people will say, we have a lot of clubs and organizations say, what can we do to help? What is the best thing we can do to help? And partners have consistently asked for one thing. They have said, we need people to monitor sites regularly, consistently, at least 3 to 4 times a year. That is what best helps the land managers to be able to understand change and to take swift and immediate action when things happen. That consistency really does matter. And we've proven that out over the 3.5 years that this stewardship program has been working. And as people commit to doing this, more and more opportunities arise for the stewards who do this. Again, can you imagine, take your favorite archaeological site wherever, say 9 Mile Canyon in Utah, one of the premier archaeological sites in the world. If you were to have photos of each of those areas, overviews, the panels, the approaches for the last 50 years of every one of those sites, at least 4 times a year, can you imagine the information we would be able to glean from that? It would be staggering. Also, again, it allows land managers who will never, ever be able to visit all of these archaeological sites in a year or 5 year or sometimes even a career on the land that they manage to know when and how to go out and to take care of the resources that are underneath their jurisdiction. Everything we do hand in hand with those land managers and the law enforcement, and law enforcement participates in all of our trainings and oftentimes many of our placements. And I'll talk to you a little bit about why that's so critical, but I wanted to share with you a little bit about the structure of the program. We have the UCSS core team, the program coordinator, the operations coordinator, the engagement specialist, and then we are actually hiring an outreach administrator right now. We also have regional coordinators designated in specific areas in the state. And those are usually our harder to reach area, people who are really tied in well in those communities that the land managers trust, that can help us with projects, site placements, and other things that we need in those regions. And then of course we have the stewards themselves. In Utah, we have 406 cultural site stewards. This makes us the largest stewardship program in the nation. Now, those are active stewards. Sometimes people will report more membership on their books, but it doesn't really matter if they're not active. And our priority isn't growth for growth's sake. In fact, we have never had a problem with membership. Our waiting list is consistently 90 to 100 people. We open it up for trainings and it fills in about an hour. So what we're focused on is getting the right people. We used to kind of focus on people who are real focused on archaeology or the groups you kind of would think would be interested in this type of thing. But what we found is sometimes those organizations had maybe drunk just a little too much of the Kool-Aid, and the old guard was really difficult to work with. And in fact, our first year of the program, we pretty much wasted about a first year trying to get a lot of those groups to conform with what we needed for this program. And one of the greatest things we ever did is we just stopped fighting them, and we went around them, and now they're irrelevant. And the program has continued to thrive despite that. And, this is kind of funny. One of the biggest challenges we have sometimes are retired archaeologists or people who are actually working in the field right now who think that they know something more than we all know. And that can be a real challenge. And I'm going to talk with you about the new evolution of volunteerism here in Utah. Volunteerism in Utah is a big deal. And we want people who want to give back and who are excited to learn and who are looking for opportunities to connect. A lot of the people who volunteer and who are attracted to this program, they're looking not necessarily because they care about archaeology, whether it's birds, butterflies, whatever. They don't really care as long as they feel like they're helping. And, somebody may be driving up the canyons to go snowboarding, but if they feel like they're helping by stopping and checking on a historic guard station or a power plant or something along the way, they're thrilled to do that because that canyon has given them so much that this gives them an opportunity to give back or to count, hatchlings In our case, we're trying to get them to focus on some of the older stuff in the area, and that sparks their interest, and it makes that area so much more interesting to them. It enhances their experience both in recreation and just knowing the history of the area where they like to go. So as long as they know that what they're doing matters, it's amazing what people will be willing to do to help to safeguard these resources. And UCSS provides that and gives people an opportunity to give back. And by the way, every single photo in this presentation are stewards and people we work with directly. Now, I wanted to talk with you about some of the demographics in the program, because I would be a bad coordinator of this program if I didn't pay careful attention to the demographics of the program, because those demographics directly reflect on the success of a program. We're very proud of our range of ages in this program because every age category has something to give. And one of the ones that we're really proud of right now is we're trying to cultivate our group that's kind of sitting down there around like 12 and 13 years old, because we found that kids are able to get to their parents where I will never be able to get their parents to maybe do something. They can get them. And we've been working a lot with Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. Families have been bringing and involving their kids into this program. And that has been amazing to see the power that those young little children can bring to a stewardship program with quite a serious topic, really. And generally, archaeological type stuff tends to lean towards heavier on the female side. This program is split just about down the middle, which is interesting to note. And then occupational statuses is another one that we follow. Now, in Utah, the majority of our stewards are employed currently in some capacity. We do have a good number who are also retired, and several students, and I don't know what that other 3% is. We're working on that. But this is really cool because those folks who are employed, they bring a lot of current ongoing expertise of their own organizations, sometimes the resources that those organizations have. Folks who are retired have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. They bring a lot of willingness, and oftentimes they have the resources and the time. Then the students often are inspired by those other people. But one thing when we survey our people, our stewards, the employed and retired folks are also inspired by the stewards and the new ideas, the students and the new ideas that they bring. So we're really happy with that occupational status mix as well. Now, stewards are effective at supporting land managers in very many different ways. And when we have to get permission where we operate under the direct permission of 141 individual land managers. Those are the people, those are not like groups within one agency. That's the individual person at that field office or at that forest or at that mining site who say, yes, you may steward on this site. So keeping those relationships strong is a big part of what we do. And since this program started, over 46 of those land managers have turned over. And in the past, a program like this would have collapsed when a land manager turns over. You know, the stewards wouldn't have had anybody to report to. Maybe the next person who came wouldn't be able to pick it up. But this way, when a land manager leaves, we're able to keep the program going. When a new one's hired, we're able to say, hi, welcome to Utah. Here's your 38 best friends. And this is where they're stewarding. Also, if there's a government shutdown, stewards can support with that and a lot of other projects that they may need. Now, we're currently stewarding 823 sites in the state of Utah. This number literally changes every day. This is actually not accurate because we had one of our guys place on 4 additional sites today. We have 363 sites that need stewards. That will change Monday as more come in. And, you know, Sophie, Kelly, if you guys like to read technical briefs, this is a really good one. This is a technical brief written by Sophia Kelly. She was with Arizona State University. And pretty much she surveyed all the states that had stewardship programs and found that states that had programs like this are more effective at preventing the destruction of archaeological resources. Wanted to share with you some of the damages that we have. So we do track all of those damages. And last year we had 30 significant damage. Now we had hundreds of scratches and little vandalisms and things here and there and environmental stuff, but 30 significant ones. And what's important about this is that these monitoring reports and that this program is tied so closely with law enforcement and all the requirements of archaeology here in the state of Utah, that those monitoring reports can be used in litigation. And we currently have several being used in litigation right now. Over here on the left, someone was digging for Spanish gold. Stewards busted them. Well, they found out what happened, saw the beer cans, called local rangers. They were able to get there, track it down, and arrest the guys. Somebody else dug a 16-foot hole on a rock imagery site looking for buried gold. This is an arson case on one of our mining sites. And just the other day, a shaker box on another rock imagery site. So because of the nature of a lot of our cultural resources here in the state of Utah, we take confidentiality super duper seriously. And as volunteers, one of the things about being a Utah Cultural Site volunteer is you are now held to a higher standard than the general public. But you are also entrusted with a lot more and more opportunities than the general public. And we always err on the side of being too hardcore. I would much rather people sitting around in a meeting at one of our partners say, "God, you know, those UCSS guys, they are way too hardcore than they're too loosey-goosey in such a way that they're actually damaging sites more than they are protecting sites." Confidentiality, you know, we are stewards. We tell that now there's always an exception like newspaper rock or something that's super, you know, that has a sign on the highway pointing to it. But for the most part, they are not allowed to share their site location. They do not share the contents of their sites. They cannot take friends to their sites. They cannot take families to their sites. They must turn off the GPS tagging on their cameras. They're not allowed to copy the documents that we give them. Those remain property of the state. And they cannot share photos of their site. I'll tell you what, you send me a photo of Utah and I can send it out to our network and I can probably find out within 3 hours where that is. That's how the majority of pots get stolen in the state of Utah. Someone will take a picture, put it up on the internet. In about 24 hours, it's gone because people know this area. And this is a really good example of it. This little rock imagery, that's about the size of a slice of pizza. If I were to turn the camera, about everybody in the Salt Lake Valley would know where that's located. So the only exception here is if the person gets permission from the land manager to take family and friends, then they must go through the training and then they can also steward that site with that individual. Our goal is to minimize the negative impact on these sites and not to create impact. It's so much easier to damage a site than it is to safeguard them. And depending on a site's sensitivity, a lot of times, you know, stewards, we won't even let them visit it if people can see them. Because we've had people try to follow stewards to sites. And we want to make sure, you know, based off what the steward tells us and then also based off the evidence on the ground, sometimes we'll adjust how we steward that site. Sometimes we steward with binoculars from a ridge. Sometimes we don't even go up to the site. And again, if people just want to see the site, this isn't really maybe the program for them. If they want to help protect it and to preserve it and to safeguard it, well, then they can really be part of it and make a huge difference. The majority of people who damage sites do not even realize that they themselves are the problem. That is the basic fact of archaeological site damage. Most people who damage site, they don't realize that they are the problem. And I wanted to share with you some of the biggest challenges that we have. People sharing and trading information on archaeological sites. People who just have to be seen as someone who knows where all the sites are. They have defined their personality as being someone who knows, kind of a gatekeeper in a sense. You know, you may tell a trusted family member, that's cool. Maybe they'll tell a trusted friend, not so cool. Maybe they'll tell 3 or 4 other friends, super duper not cool. And then all of a sudden, we don't know who the heck they're talking about and who they're telling. And that site is getting damaged because one person tells another person, tells another person, tells 12 other people. And if it ain't on social media, for some reason, people don't think that it happened. And people just can't help themselves from posting all their neatest experiences on social media. And that has been incredibly damaging to a lot of archaeological and cultural resources, especially the sensitive ones. And one thing that we deal with a lot are people, we call it site bagging and bragging here in the state of Utah. And they just got to bag another archaeological site and then they got to brag about it because they can't experience that themselves or with their close friend or somebody, they have to brag about it. And that usually ends up to some type of negative impact. And also, there seems to be this mentality of people who sometimes think for some reason that they themselves are the expert and that it doesn't apply to them. And that is a really dangerous attitude and has in fact, recently I have removed people from the UCSS program because of that, and they no longer can participate in projects throughout the state because that type of attitude is the last kind of attitude that we need. Now, stewards have opportunities to make a big difference in both projects and events, as well as stewarding. Some of our special projects, I mean, it doesn't get more real than this. These are actual projects that are happening in the state of Utah right now, helping living people, whether that's the Chinese railroad worker descendant community trying to learn more about their descendants out on the Transcontinental Railroad, to Fort Douglas, to whatever. These are stewards that are coming to help document some of the stuff that was found in those excavations, or helping with other projects. It's pretty cool to be able to be invited to participate in actual ongoing archaeology that's making a huge impact right now in the state of Utah. Service projects that play a big role in helping to protect and to safeguard cultural resources here in the state of Utah. Site documentation. You know, we have so many sites that need to be documented. Our program actually pays for professional archaeologists to go out with our volunteers on sites that the land managers have identified as ones that they either need redocumentations for, or they need to be documented, but for whatever reason, they don't currently have the bandwidth to do it. So we'll actually get a bunch of great volunteers to go out and to help document these sites. The caveat there is, though, they must be active site stewards, because a lot of these, we need to know that these are people we can rely on and people we can trust. Stewards also help with tabling events, educational events, trainings, and conferences. Our stewards are rock stars, and we just simply, the state's too big. We can't do it with 3 full-time staff and 5 regional coordinators. And we lean heavily on our stewards for their help and their expertise. Now, how we support our stewards, you know, we're very available. They can call us with any concerns, questions, and we do all we can to support them. We provide them with opportunities that they maybe wouldn't ever have otherwise. We make sure that we have get-togethers where we can all get together and meet one another and learn and to grow. Workshops, oftentimes these workshops are stemmed from the interest of the stewards, things that they want to learn about, things that they would like to experience. We have a book club, and on this particular one, the Old Spanish Trail, the BLM head of the Spanish Trail, he's going to take us on a tour, show us a lot of these sites, and talk to us about the history and what they're doing to safeguard it. Educational opportunities and networking. As an organization, you really can't get tied in better with every single land managing agency and all the folks who really impact the cultural landscape of Utah. This is one that we've done, just an identification workshop where folks are invited to. We also work with land managers to set up approved tours with expert guides like the State Historic Preservation Officer here in the Cottonwood Canyons. And we have a lot of resources available for stewards, whether that's on our website, our manual with hard copy digital. We send out Christmas cards. We do monthly newsletters. All of our upcoming events are open to stewards so that they can register whatever part of the state they're happy to participate in it. And being steward can be super awesome if you're awesome. It's a great program for folks, and it really is a catalyst for bringing the outdoor recreation community closer in to helping to safeguard these resources. And I keep hitting recreation in Utah because recreation is Utah. Utah is defined in many cases by our amazing outdoor recreation, and our outdoor recreationalists are among our most phenomenal stewards. In fact, I would argue that pretty much every one of our stewards is in some capacity an outdoor recreationalist. And the last thing I just wanted to say is stewardship builds community out of diverse networks. If you look at our network of partners, it looks like a time bomb. They should not be friends. In fact, a lot of them are suing one another or fighting or disagreeing on just about everything, except the fact that these cultural resources need to be monitored, safeguarded, and protected. And this is a really good example. For instance, in this photo, there are 3 land managers, and every single other person in that photo belongs to one of our partner groups who in some capacity is supporting those land managers. And in Utah, that's really unique, where all of our land managers, you know, if there's a problem, they can get on the phone with another agency and talk it through. We have open communications task force that meet together and, again, project that unified front to the world that this is something that we do care about. Anyways, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys today. Thank you so much for letting me join you and to share with you a little bit about the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program. And if there's still time, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you a lot, Ian. We do have a couple of questions, and I will remind everybody, if you do have some questions or comments, you can type them into the chat. So let's see. We have a question. What lessons have you learned as you have gone along that you think would be important to site stewardship?
You know, one thing that I have learned is it is really important to try to work with everybody. A lot of times organizations, they only attract people just like themselves, you know, and that was a big problem with a lot of the stewardship programs in Utah that were just small ones that had started prior to this one. And that can be problematic because pretty much you're just preaching to people who believe exactly like you do. And by working actively to try to draw in different groups, different communities, different organizations, different clubs, that's really made this program so strong and so powerful. But it also, you know, means that we have to realize that we don't have all the answers all the time, but that's okay. And that, I think that's absolutely critical, making sure that the program, the group, whatever it is, isn't becoming so similar that you're really hurting your effectiveness.
And how many site stewards are in the program now?
406.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have a waiting list of about 100 people right now.
So I don't know how many others, are you aware of what other states are doing in this respect?
I am. The other two biggest states are Arizona and Nevada. And Utah, Arizona, Nevada, Idaho, and Wyoming have they have programs that are centralized out of the SHPOs. And so we work very closely with one another. And then Colorado has a really good program out of Canyons of the Ancients, but it's not a centralized statewide program. And I know California has a few little programs. Texas has got one. Florida's got one. There's several other states that have programs. But as far as I know, the only statewide centralized ones are Utah, Wyoming, Nevada, and Arizona.
Yeah. So what recommendations might you have for, let's say you have a state that doesn't have a whole lot of rock art, but it does have some, and so you're not going to get a lot of the partners that you have, but you still want to be able to do something as far as stewardship goes. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important that you steward everything. You really need to make sure for a program to be successful like this, to tie it into not just one topic. You know, we have a lot of people who really are passionate about rock art and they make great stewards. But you know what? We often will say, hey, here's a few panels you get to steward, but we also need you to steward this mining site that's on the same road leading up to that area. And that's really important because it gets the buy-in from much bigger groups. Like if I were to go to the state legislature in Utah and say, I just want to steward rock imagery, they'd say, that's cool, but that's not the only thing in Utah. You know, and so it's really, I think, important to get good buy-in from everybody who's a different descendant of something else to say, hey, all of this stuff does matter. And that will help to get that program going.
Do you discover any new rock art through this program?
Absolutely. A lot of times, all sorts of new cultural heritage is brought up. And one of the neat things about it is a lot of those stories and that intangible components that I mentioned comes about because of this. You know, as different communities, different groups get involved, a lot of times the sites that we steward has come through a community saying, hey, we are aware of this and we're concerned about it. And we'll approach the land manager, whether that, again, is a private land, a ranch, whoever, and we'll say, hey, this is something we have some concerns on for these reasons. Would you be willing to have stewards on them? And I would say the majority of the time, people are very excited to accommodate that. And they're glad that somebody is aware of it and concerned.
Well, thank you. I think that covers the questions for the moment. It certainly was great hearing about your program, how successful it is. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, great. Again, thanks to all the attendees for your interest. And I remind you that if you'd like to learn more about ARARA or get involved, please check out our website and Facebook pages. We also invite everyone to renew or join our membership to support the study and conservation of rock art. So until next time, good night, everybody, and stay safe.